Hello, and welcome to the Gravel Ride podcast, where we go deep on the sport of gravel cycling through in-depth interviews with product designers, event organizers, and athletes who are pioneering the sport. I'm your host, Craig Dalton, a lifelong cyclist who discovered gravel cycling back in 2016 and made all the mistakes you don't need to make. I approach each episode as a beginner to unlock all the knowledge you need to become a great gravel cyclist. So as we start out this week, let me ask you a question. When you're done with a ride, what's next? Do you just hang up the cleats, put the bike away, and go on to the next thing? Or do you take a moment for self-care? If you're like me, it's often on to the next thing with nary a thought for what I just put my body through. This week's guest is Roeser, a Board Certified Orthopedic Specialist and physical therapist at Ability Physical Therapy. Kurt is an experienced distance runner and cyclist and brings a wealth of experience to the field of recovery. Before we jump into this week's show, I need to say a big thank you to this week's sponsor, The Feed. The Feed is the largest online marketplace for your sports nutrition, offering the brands you know and love, from Scratch Lab to Cliff, plus their athlete-customized supplements called Feed Formulas. I can say what I appreciate about The Feed is that they've got all the brands that I've come to count on as a gravel cyclist. I can't tell you how many times I go to the grocery store and try to pick up something, but it never does the trick. I'm just not getting the diversity of brands that are cycling specific, and that's where the Feed comes in. I can get whatever I want, whenever I want. I talked a little bit about the Feed formulas last week, but I want to drill into it a little bit more as I've been consuming them on a daily basis. Feed formulas are personalized supplements for athletes developed in part with Dr. Kevin Sprouse. Dr. Sprouse is probably best known in cycling circles for his work with the EF Pro Cycling team as team doctor. He follows the same protocols he uses for top pro athletes to develop the Feed formulas, and the Feed has made them customizable and available to you. You can shop at thefeed.com/thegravelride and save 50% off your first order. When you visit thefeed.com, you can get personalized recommendation based on your needs as an athlete. The Feed formula comes in a convenient daily pouch, so no more messy bottles on the counter. Everything you need is in a simple packet for you to consume every day. Remember, simply visit thefeed.com/thegravelride and get 50% off your first order of the Feed formula. With that said, let's dive right into this week's show. Hey, Kurt, welcome to the show.
Hey, Craig, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
It's going great. I'm excited to dig into this conversation about recovery. I feel like half these podcasts are guided by my own personal interests, so I just hope the listener likes to join me on this journey.
For sure. Yeah, that's what it's all about. Learning for yourself and helping some other folks at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate you giving me the time to pick your brain. Let's start off with a little bit about just your background and how you got into your profession, and then we'll dig into some questions.
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of grew up being a distance runner. I ran college in track at the University of Florida. And then, like a lot of runners, I got injured a lot. So that led me to want to be a PT. And then when I was in PT school, I got into cycling a lot and some triathlons. And so, yeah, I kind of developed a just broader enjoyment for endurance sports in general. Yeah, so now I am a physical therapist working in an outpatient setting and work a lot with runners and other endurance folks, whether it's cyclists or skiers, all sorts of fun stuff, just kind of helping people get back out there. And then, I still like to run like competitively. So my marathon best is a 2:17. So I got to run in the US marathon trials a couple of years ago. So hoping to get a couple more good marathons in me, and then just transition to more just fun, diverse stuff, more biking and all that good stuff. So
nice.
Yeah.
I imagine being in Colorado, you've got no shortage of patients bringing their bodies in damaged from the great outdoors and their endurance athletic pursuits.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, overuse injuries, and then cycling, tons of impact injuries, falling, shoulder stuff. Yeah, there's lots of good ways to hurt yourself doing fun things here. So it is good for me, but I like to think I do more good than I take away from society. So
I imagine if you're getting people back out on the trails and the slopes, you're doing a service to the citizens of Colorado.
Yeah, and it is really fun for me to like help people that are motivated to get back to doing, whatever their activity is, their sport is. And if yeah, people really love doing something, they're super motivated to do their PT, whether it's coming in for manual therapy or do their exercises or strengthening or whatever it is. Yeah, so it's a fun place to practice for me for sure.
I wanted to open up a conversation about recovery from bike rides. I mean, every listener of this podcast, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the listeners are doing big gravel events, 100-mile gravel events, or the training for those types of events. And every single one of us has come home, had a little food, and then had our legs start to get really solid and heavy. And I just thought it'd be interesting to talk to someone, a professional, and understand what's actually going on. And then later in the conversation, let's talk about what we can be doing about it.
Hmm. Totally, yeah, and that's something that like everybody is going to encounter soreness, and yeah, it's kind of like a hot topic. Like recovery, I feel like the past 5 to 10 years is getting a lot more spotlight, and we see what the pros are doing in various sports, and I think we all are want to figure out the best ways to optimize our own training and lifestyle and stuff. So yeah, it's a really kind of hot topic now. But basically, like the physiologic, like kind of like process of soreness is a very normal response to kind of a newer type of exercise that you're doing, or maybe not a new type of exercise, but an increase in training load. So we see this in the early parts of summer where people haven't been biking a lot or haven't been doing whatever their sport is in particular, but then you start doing a lot more of it. And even though we think we're being pretty like gradual with it, we're usually our mind is biting off more than our body can chew, so to speak. So soreness is just a result of doing something that you're not used to, and then your body's adapting to it. And in that process, you're going to feel some soreness. And one of the interesting things that I always remember from exercise physiology class, the professor saying like the only way to prevent muscle soreness is previous exposure to the same stimulus. So you can't ever prevent yourself from getting sore, but you can just kind of like expect to get sore when you do something hard for the first time, or bike longer than you have in a while, and then know that like if you do that same thing again, you're not going to be as sore from it. So
Yeah,
kind of like
that
an up
makes
and down
sense.
process.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. If I think about my any given week, I can go out and do an hour-long training ride and 1,200 feet of climbing and don't feel sore at all from that kind of effort. But when I get out on the
Mhm.
weekends and I add, 5, 6 times that amount of climbing, those are the days in which I come home. But I know from experience over time, if I'm training for an event, if I've gradually built, I can then go out and ride, 4,000 foot of climbing ride and not be sore and save that
Mhm.
soreness for the 8,000 feet climb days.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I also wanted to differentiate between like muscle soreness and then like tendon or joint soreness, because that's a really common thing that people ask about is, and how to differentiate that from like so like I think delayed onset muscle soreness we're all like pretty familiar with. Like you do something hard and then you're sore from it for a couple of days. So that process is partly kind of like mechanical at the cellular level. So you're actually getting some micro trauma to the cells that are causing your muscle fibers to contract upon one another, basically these sliding filaments. So you're actually like creating some micro tears in those fibers, which sounds bad, but it's how our body knows to adapt to that stimulus. So if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have that positive adaptation that we're looking for, so that we get faster, can bike longer, or whatnot.
Now, are the
Um,
tears getting repaired by the body as you
mhm,
rest? Okay.
absolutely. So when we perceive soreness or when we feel soreness, that's definitely linked to some sort of like inflammatory process, which we used to always think inflammation is bad. We got to get rid of it. But it's actually like the way that our body signals to bring in like, new protein and all these like building blocks to repair that tissue. So soreness is actually like a sign that our body is adapting to that. And it just is uncomfortable in a transient manner for us, but it's how our body's like working through that cascade of that inflammatory process and ultimately getting stronger from it. So that's kind of like the more mechanical aspect of it. And then there's also like a kind of more of a chemical side of it. So like we've all heard the term like lactic acid, or more correctly, just lactate and hydrogen ions. Like when you're doing really high intensity exercise, your muscles get more acidic, and So that can create some of that soreness feeling afterwards, just from those metabolites being in our cells in places that they aren't normally there. So that's kind of the two big components of muscle soreness, and some of the things that we can like know about and work through mentally, but also there's some tools that we can use and things that we can do to kind of try to limit that and speed it up a little bit.
Do the muscle groups react differently when you're doing short, intense intervals versus longer endurance type riding?
Yeah, so definitely. So the shorter, higher intensity efforts are going to be the things that really get the, lactate and hydrogen ions like to high levels in your muscles, and probably in fairly specific places. So if you're really pushing the power, you're going to feel it in those muscles, like your quads, maybe your calves if you're going uphill. So you're going to feel that in pretty isolated ways versus like a long, kind of like easier day where you're just out kind of cruising around, but maybe you're out for a long period of time. Then I think people are going to be more likely to get soreness in more of like your postural muscles. So your shoulders, your neck, your back, your arms, like things that are like supporting your posture. And I've heard on the show you've talked numerous times about like bike fitting, and so that's where like being comfortable and being set up nice on your bike is really important to make sure that you're just kind of like optimally using those postural muscles and not overstressing certain areas, and just kind of setting yourself up to be comfortable and enjoy your ride, which is probably the most important thing. But then I think where people get the most sore is kind of those race situations or group rides where you're going for a long time and at a higher intensity than you're used to. And I think that's what a lot of us kind of do. We're kind of in that maybe weekend warrior sort of a situation where we're doing maybe an hour during the week and then maybe double that, triple that on the weekend and more vert. And so that's when you're going to get just globally sore in a lot of your cycling muscles, and that's going to be from that kind of acidosis and mechanical breakdown. And then just as you fatigue out your slower twitch fibers, you're going to start to rely on the fast twitch fibers that aren't used to working as much, and they're going to fatigue faster and get more sore because they're just not used to working. But again, part of like a broader good adaptation process, I think. So kind of that good soreness.
Yeah. Well, first off, guilty as charged. I'm often one of those people who goes out and tries to do things I have no business doing. I think that's a bit of the, gravel cycling mentality, right? Is this like you're going to have a lot of challenges in front of you in these long events and you're going to push through it. When when a rider is taking themselves beyond, let's just call it their fitness or what they've been able to train to for a particular event, what kind of damage is being done at that point to the body? And does the body just sort of naturally give you the feedback? I mean, we've all sort of shut down on a climb or cramped in a long event and the body's screaming at you, hey, you can't do this, you need to take a break. Can you just talk about like what's going on in the body at that point and how should we be reacting? Obviously we have strong mental desire to complete the events, but that may exceed what our bodies are capable of at that moment.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's a really hard spot as an athlete to be in, I think. And I think it's really important to know that like when you're feeling that like subjective um, discomfort or like muscle work or just overall fatigue setting in, like that's our brain is trying to tell us that we're doing something that we are is like kind of outside of what our brain perceives we can do. But it's it's almost impossible to exercise yourself to death or to actually do any damage to your tissue. So that's one thing that we should be very confident that we're not going to damage our muscles by cycling for a long period of time at a very high intensity. In other sports like CrossFit or in ultra running, like you hear people getting rhabdomyolysis, which is where you're doing so much damage to your muscles that those muscle proteins get back into your bloodstream and then eventually to your kidneys, and you're basically creating like kidney failure, which is a medical emergency. And that does happen, and I've seen it in CrossFitters and ultra marathoners, but kind of more from that eccentric type of loading reaction. So in cycling, you're I've never heard of that happening in cycling. So yeah, so we can be pretty confident that we're not going to really truly like damage anything per se, but it's just one of those things like pick choose your battles, or like live to fight another day. So, and I think means different things to different people. But if it's worth it to you to really push it during this particular race, like just know that you're going to be really sore for a few days, and it's going to like kind of mess with your next week of training, but ultimately you're going to be fine from it and you're going to adapt to it. So
Yeah, I think if I think back to my Ironman days, I can remember just basically not being able to walk down the stairs after doing an Ironman, having to hold
yeah.
on the railing because I couldn't support my body weight going down.
Hmm. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, so but I guess to maybe better answer your question, like there's no point in like that we should ever be worried that we're gonna like push ourselves too hard under most circumstances. Obviously, like within like reason, but like at the end of the day, like we just gotta remember like we're out there to have fun and keep the bigger picture in mind too. And like you could have the perfectly designed training program and ramp up very gradually, and you're still gonna do stuff that's gonna make you sore. So yeah, it's kind of unavoidable.
How should riders think about it? So let's say you go for a massive ride on Saturday and you still want to ride on Sunday, and you're waking up sore, a little damaged from the day before.
Mhm.
Any concerns going out the next day, or does the body just tend to give you the information you need and regulate your abilities, based on that soreness?
Yeah, so it's definitely going to be good for you to go out and still get a ride in the next day, like a nice like recovery ride. So obviously, like back to back hard days are going to be challenging, and you're just going to accumulate more fatigue essentially. But yeah, it's definitely like good for you to get out and get at least some easy spinning in, and probably even help you recover faster. So there's a reason that like endurance sports like we're able to do it on like most days, and it's because like in between those harder efforts, like it's really good for you to like just have an easy recovery day. So yeah, that's definitely good. And another really interesting thing is like even if your quads are wrecked and you've like we did like some imaging and we saw that like you had all these like tears in your microfibers, like you're not going to make that any worse by pedaling through it the following day. You're just going to have less power output. So you're not going to be able to like work as hard as you would
Yeah.
if you didn't have it, but you're not going to do anything bad by any means. So definitely good to get moving.
Yeah, that makes sense. I often feel like, if I do a really massive day, I call it the athletic hangover, where the next day and I think it's probably part dehydration, but the body's sore. I end up with a headache, it just overdid it.
Yeah, totally. And that's like a bigger thing that like I realize with people more recently. It's like, I always think about like the physical side of things, like orthopedically, like, muscles and joints and tendons and all that stuff. But like our body's pretty good at telling us so like how it's doing. So if we can like learn to listen to the more like subtle signs that our body's telling us, like and we get better over the years of listening to that, like and help you maybe adjust your workouts that you had planned for that week and still go out and ride, but just like oh man, I'm just not feeling very good today. I'm feeling a little off, so I'm just gonna take it easy, or I'm gonna still do the intervals that I had planned, but just like dial it back a little bit. So yeah, just like successful athletes and people that have better longevity in the sport are people that are good kind of at like listening to those more subtle signs is what I found with working with people at like pretty elite levels.
Yeah, and I
So
think
yeah.
we're certainly in the heyday of the ability to have data points to back that up as well. Whether
Hmm.
it's a device measuring your HRV or just basic heart rate tracking, I think you can
Hmm.
really know a lot about yourself. And unlike the athletes maybe of the 90s who might push through it now, I think most coaches are saying, it's better to back off and understand that you've just pushed it too far and live to fight another day rather than pushing through the training if your body's saying, hey, this is a hard no today.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Just keep the consistency like over time approach and know that like what you're doing like this week you'll be better for like 3 months down the road. Like everything just like compounds on itself. So just like keeping that consistency and that long term approach, weeks and months and years, and then eventually you'll be able to do more than you thought you'd be able to do. So
Yeah. You were mentioning sort of there's muscle soreness and fatigue, and then there's a fine line between that next stage of actual injury. Are there things that we should be looking out for to know, like, hey, we've maybe crossed the line and we need to pay a little bit more attention to what's going on?
I think anything, well, like pain wise, like in muscles or tendons or joint, like, anything that's transitioning towards like a sharp pain or like a nervy sort of sensation where it's numbness or tingling, or yeah, anything that just like is getting worse as you're going from a pain perspective. Yeah, like it's you want to like not push through too much of that. So we like 4 out of 10 on a just a pain visual analog scale is a good kind of cutoff. Like, so if you're doing something and it's like you're like a 4 out of 10, or it's pain that's like not really tolerable or getting worse, then it's usually like a good idea to like, shut it down or go easier and kind of make your way home. And then, there are like more like medical emergencies, like rhabdomyolysis that I mentioned, like that people are you're going to notice like basically like you will be completely like you'll be unable to go on, and like people like collapse and it's like an ambulance call. So obviously like using common sense about that, or like anything like with your heart, just yeah, like
Yeah.
pay
Yeah.
attention to your vitals. If your Apple Watch
It's
tells you you're having a heart attack, then you should probably call an ambulance.
Yeah, exactly. Don't use your pig-headed endurance athlete mentality to power through absolutely everything, just some of the hard stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Transitioning a little bit now, we've talked a little bit about, what's happening post-ride if we're sore and what to look out for in terms of injury. Are there things we should be doing before we get on the bike that would help our muscles that day and after the ride?
hmm Yeah, so I think this is kind of like, big picture stuff, like the things that we can consistently do over time to help in a preventative way are kind of like just nailing down the basics that I think we all probably like know about, but like, diet and sleep and overall life stress. Yeah, like making sure that your nutrition before rides and during rides and after rides is good and adequate. And then making sure that your bike setup is good, your bike fit is good. So, yeah, in terms of specifically like pre-ride, like I think just making sure that you've got enough fuel and hydration, and like my kind of preference for a warm up is just do the activity pretty easily for the first, 10, 15, 20 minutes. So I'm somebody that like I like to just, get out and start going pretty easily and let my body warm up that way. Sometimes people prefer more of like a dynamic warm up. So maybe you spend 5 minutes doing some stretches for parts that you know are tight, hamstrings or quads
Yeah.
or hip flexors or back. So a little bit of dynamic stretching is probably a really good idea. But yeah,
Yeah, I've spoke to some
pre-ride.
about that dynamic stretching idea, just the idea of doing a few motions to get your body kind of
hmm
understanding what's going to come when you throw a leg over the bike.
hmm Totally. And then also like even some like spinal extension. So bending your back backwards just gently, like all these things should be like gentle. We're not trying to force it, but just like we're going to spend a prolonged amount of time like in a very similar position for our spine. So just doing some of that, like even like the opposite motion of, getting some back extension or some thoracic rotation in there. So yeah, any sort of movement and kind of being intentionally vague there, because one of the issues that I think we have with warm-ups or recovery is like there's so much information out there and there's so much stuff that you could do. So the best thing to do is do something that is easy for you to do consistently and that you'll actually do and that you kind of to some extent enjoy doing or get some satisfaction out of doing. So I think there's a lot of like room for individual variability in a warm up. But the big thing is, yeah, nail the basics and kind of just be consistent with that.
That makes sense. The bigger area I wanted to talk to you about is really the post ride recovery and the things we
Mm-hmm.
can do. I mean, I often get off the bike and am, obligated to do something with immediately with the family or with my son. I need to jump on it and I don't pay any attention other than maybe having a recovery drink after I get off the bike. But in an ideal world, what are we doing that's going to help promote the healing of those micro tears in your muscles and anything you can do to feel better? Maybe talk about it from, hey, if you only have a tiny amount of time, to, hey, if you really want to go do everything you can, these are what you can do.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, and so that's the hard thing is like we want to spend as much time doing the thing that we want to do. So we want to get that extra mile in on the bike or do that extra loop on the bike, and then we come home and like, yeah, I have to go straight into the shower and go to work, or like, yeah, take care of the
Totally.
kiddos or whatever, get your day going.
Yeah. I always
So
tell my wife that the greatest gift I have is when I have a 2 hour ride, but a 3 hour window. It just
Oh
feels
yeah.
like such a luxury because it's usually I have a 2 hour window and I'm going to do an hour and 59-minute ride.
Hmm. Yep, that's so true. And I think we're all guilty of that. It's like I know that I could get back 10 minutes early and I could do some stretches, or I could do those strength exercises my PT told me to do, or I could make myself a better breakfast and not, you know, eat in the car on the way to work or whatever. But yeah, at the end of the day, like we want to do what we want to do. So I think oh, I think of it as like just building in like 5 minutes, honestly. Like if you can consistently do that, like maybe not even after all of your rides, but after like a hard effort or your long ride on the weekend, just say like, I'm gonna, like when I get off the bike, I'm gonna spend 5 minutes for myself, just kind of like relaxing, get your post ride nutrition going, get start to get rehydrated. I think that stuff should definitely be a priority, especially as we're getting back towards the summer months here pretty soon, hopefully. But and then yeah, for me, like that ritual should include like some sort of like soft tissue self mobilization, or maybe just dynamic stretching,
What does
something
that
to.
mean? What does what you just said? I didn't understand what that meant.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, soft tissue mobilization is kind of a fancier word for essentially like massage. So soft tissue is, muscle or tendon or fascia, any of the softer structures in our body. So that's like a really big thing in the kind of recovery world, is like we know that elite athletes, they're going to get off the bike, they're going to have an hour long massage, and there is something to that because everyone still does it, if they have the time and the money and the luxury to do that. But there's not a ton of like great like scientific evidence as to why like massage or soft tissue work, like how it actually like physically helps us. Like there's a lot of like theories at the tissue level and then at the person level as to why that like helps us recover. But so most of us, like, we're not going to have the time to do that, especially every day. So if you can just spend 5 minutes like while you're at your car before you drive back home, or before you even like come in the house, just have foam roller or R8 or something like that, where you're gonna hang the bike up and just like do it in your routine. And so basically soft tissue mobilization, to get back to that, is using something like a foam roller or the R8 or the stick or some other tool to massage your muscles yourself. So I think we're all familiar with that.
And how deeply do you need to go into like with the stick or a foam roller?
Mhm.
Like sometimes, when you're laying on the foam roller, you can put all your weight on or only partial weight. I think the masochist in us often like thinks like, oh, you got to push it in really hard in order for it to have an effect. What is that right balance? Is it just a matter of getting that motion across the muscle, or does it need to have some power into it?
Yeah, so that's like, I think you could ask that question to a room of PTs or other kind of similar field, and you might get, 10 different answers. But basically, the benefits of that are, the only reliable thing that we know that massage is doing is creating a central nervous system relaxation response and endogenous dopamine release, which basically means like, dopamines are endorphins, are feel good endorphins. So we're creating some sort of relaxation response globally from our brain down to our muscles. So we can like see that like with certain types of MRIs and brain MRIs. So, and then the other kind of theories are like we're moving around water, we're kind of flushing out our muscles, we're maybe loosening up the different fascial layers, between muscle and skin, and getting those to glide better. There's like the trigger point release theory. So a trigger point is a tight muscle knot or band in the tissue, and so you're pushing on that and restricting blood flow, and then you're getting it to release that way. So my interpretation of all that is like we know that we're getting our brain to relax our muscles, and then on top of that there's probably some of those local tissue level responses that are also at play too. So long long story to that question is like it can be kind of up to you, like what you want. It doesn't have to be extremely painful, and it, in my opinion, I don't think it should be super painful, but like it, it's okay if it's like uncomfortable for sure, especially when you find those tight spots in the muscles that you've been working pretty hard. So I think
Yeah,
it should be like pretty firm, but it doesn't have to be killing you. And if you're really sore, then it could be really gentle. So it
yeah.
could be kind of whatever you feel like you need.
So I'm curious, and I'm certainly not asking you to pick either or, but the first thing you mentioned was self massage or foam rolling, as if you
Hmm.
only had 5 minutes. A lot of times I've thought about like, oh, I get off the bike and I want to stretch. Like stretching
Hmm.
might be my go-to. Would you say the foam rolling self massage first, and then if you have more time, layer in stretching after that?
Yeah, I honestly I'd say some variability in there is probably good. And it's going to be person to person dependent. So like there's a lot of days where I feel like I just want to grab the R8 and just like, roll on my quads and my calves and my hamstring, and that's kind of all I need, and I don't feel like I need to really do any stretching. But then yeah, there's other days where like yeah, the opposite might be true. So I think it's good to like just get in a routine of spending that time doing something. And honestly, like if we designed a science experiment where we like had group A do one and group B do the other, it probably would come out like fairly similar in a long-term kind of like study. It makes a lot better sense to me in my brain to like actually kind of get in there and like use some force to like get things like moving around at that local level, and that's gonna also get like that nice like central nervous system like pain modulation, just like get everything to settle down.
Yeah.
So I think that the massage kind of stuff is seems to be more beneficial in my mind, but it one of those things again, like if we only have a couple of minutes, like just pick something and do it, and don't get bogged down in the specifics.
Just make sure you're maximizing those minutes, whatever
Yeah.
you're doing,
And
and
that's why
adding a little bit more.
I like something that's portable. So like if you're driving to parking lot or trailhead before you start your ride, then like something that you can take with you, like if you're keeping in your car or um, in your bag with your snacks for post ride or whatever, like just yeah, pull out the Roll Recovery R8, and like that you can do it like sitting at the back of your car before you even like get in the get in the car and drive away. Like that's what I try to do because I know like once I get home I'm not going to do it. But you
Yeah.
see, I mean, in Boulder we see people with that you foam rollers at their trailhead and all sorts of things, the massage guns. Like there's all sorts of things that are out there, and I think finding anything that works for you is totally fine.
Yeah, it certainly seems like the recovery industry over the last 5 or 6 years has exploded, and we referenced the Roll Recovery R8 a couple
Mm,
times already, but we haven't really talked about what that is. So we set the stage by saying, "Hey, foam rolling, great thing you can do, pretty simple, one tool." The R8 is something that is similar in terms of its efficacy. It's just approaching it in a little different, is a little different way.
yeah. Yeah, totally. And the oh, you have the adjustable version too, I think,
Yeah.
the
So what I
the dial.
what it,
Wow.
it's hard to describe to the listener, right? But it's
Yeah.
basically, it's got what is like almost four rollerblade wheels and
Uh,
spring loaded that you can adjust, and you
mhm.
can bring it to the outside of your leg and it'll roll up and down, making it maybe easier to use while you're sitting versus a foam roller, which may require you to be laying on the ground to do.
Yeah, yeah, sitting or standing, and honestly, I when they first came out with this product, I being a PT, like I convinced people to exercise all the time, and I thought like, oh well, I mean, people are if people are going to choose to spend something that's more expensive than a regular, $20 foam roller, I think most people are just going to pick the foam roller, and I've been really surprised, like having had one of these in the clinic and just like having people try it, like people love it because it's simple, it's easy, and I think even just getting down the ground is a barrier for some people, and you also just can't get as much pressure like in certain places where you need it, your calf or like the lateral part of your quad, like near your IT band. So yeah, I think it is a pretty useful tool to have something that can be handheld and that you can kind of like adjust the pressure by either like turning the dial to make it harder or pressing a little bit harder with your hand on that one spot, and you just kind of like run through places that are feeling like you worked them, and then when you kind of find a spot that's sore, kind of just seek and destroy, and just like find that tight spot and
Yeah.
press on it and get it to release. So
Yeah,
it is like
I do find it a little bit easier than the foam roller, to be honest. Again, just being lazy and maybe sitting around watching TV, I can
mhm,
take the R8 and just run it across my legs and feel like I'm doing some of the work.
mhm. Yeah, and the kind of the rubber grippiness is good. Like I think a lot of times what people like from manual therapy that like I do is like we're kind of putting a little bit of stretch on that fascia, and we're getting things to release in that way. So I think there's something to be said for like the kind of the grippiness too of the inserts that they have that you can kind of swap in and out. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of my go-tos, I think, just
The
for.
other big thing that's exploded, I think, has been the percussion massage tools
Mhm.
that are out there, and a number of different brands offer that type of product. Is that kind of doing a similar thing, just in a more targeted way, or how do you think about those devices?
Yeah, I think those are I think those are pretty cool as well. Yeah, I feel like everybody's asking me about those these days, and those are great for those harder to get areas where like the glute med or TFL, like a lot of times people have tightness there. So it's going to be like a little bit more pinpoint and essentially a similar effect in that it is going to create this again like top down brain relaxation of the muscle that we're trying to work on, but it's just doing it by like hammering at it really quickly. And it's something like for me, I like it in certain areas, and then I just like the more pressure in other areas. So if you can have both, and it's like one of those things you can have both. But again, like something that's easy to use and portable, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like over the years, I've just sort of subsequently acquired more and more of these devices.
Oh yeah,
Yet I
for sure.
haven't, yeah, just don't do it enough. That's the main problem. But again, some of these are really helping me improve the amount of time I spend on my muscles, which they're appreciating.
Yeah, totally.
The other one I wanted to just tease out with you and understand a little bit better. When we see the pro tour riders on the road in their team buses after the races, I often see them in these air recovery boots.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, like, just what's going on with those.
Yeah. So I'll be honest, I've only used those a couple times, like when they were pretty new when I was like in college. So we had some of those in the training room. And basically it's compression, and I believe it's graded in compression. So it's kind of the idea is mechanically pushing fluid back like proximally towards your torso. So helping you kind of clear lymphatic fluid or like our kind of low pressure venous system. So that's the idea is it's kind of like helping to flush your muscles out. So for me personally, the juice isn't worth the squeeze with those. I being a PT, I'm biased to encourage people to do some sort of movement, and those are kind of the opposite of that. It's saying like, oh well, why don't you just sit here and then this will help your muscles. And in reality, I think if you probably just went for a walk or chased your kids around the playground for that same 20 minutes, I think that might be the same benefit there.
Is it, am I understanding you correctly that it's attempting to do something different than the foam rolling or massage gun would do?
I think so because those are going to be just more global. It's just pressure on your whole leg. So it's and at the same time. So on both legs at the same time, they're just pushing fluid up to your lymphatic system to be kind of like flushed and cleared out. So I haven't seen any data or anything on the efficacy of that, but like a lot of people still use them, especially in pro situations. And I feel like everyone I know in Boulder has one, and people love them. So I think there must be something to it. But yeah, the idea is it's pushing fluid away from your extremities, which in theory should be helpful. So I think that could be
Does
a
your
helpful too.
does your body process, so if it's pushing it away from your extremities into your kind of core, does the body process it through the core more efficiently and get it out of the body?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, like anytime. Uh, like our lymphatic system and our venous system is a low pressure system while our arteries are high pressure. So if that's why gravity has an effect on edema and swelling. And so if somebody, was is has surgery or sprains if you sprain your ankle, that's an extreme case of there's a lot of swelling in that limb. And so, if you elevate your leg above your um, heart while you're laying on the couch, then gravity is going to help that kind of like trickle down sort of towards your organs where that's going to be like filtered and then put that fluid gets put back into your bloodstream eventually. So it's the idea is it's basically like compressing and bringing that fluid to be recycled faster, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, it's
Um,
super interesting. Super interesting. Cool. Well, I appreciate you giving us like this overview, and I like the fact that we've left the listener with this idea of like, there's a hierarchy of things you can be doing to support yourself post ride, and the very basics are carve out just a few minutes of your time, work on a little foam rolling or self massage as at a bare minimum, and then beyond that, layer in these other modalities of repair if you have time. But the important thing is just build this into your routines.
Totally. Yeah, and then just have it be something that you can do consistently, and then also just make sure that you're covering the basics with your nutrition and sleep and life stress. And we should all be doing some strength training like twice a week, even if it's not our thing. Doing some just general strength training for the legs and arms can be whatever you want, or it can be very specific to biking, is also really important for our bodies and longevity in the sport and moving in different ways. So I definitely think that's an important part of recovery, even though it's kind of on the front side. It's not going to help you after you're sore, but it'll help you from getting sore by doing things if you're stronger going into that.
That's great perspective, Kurt. Thanks. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Fun to talk with you.
Cheers. That's going to do it for this week's broadcast. Big thanks to The Feed for sponsoring the show. And remember, simply visit thefeed.com/thegravelride to get 50% off your first order of the Feed formula. And a big thank you to Kurt for joining us. I hope you learned a lot about recovery. I know I sure did. There's definitely things that I need to integrate into my routine. If you're interested in connecting with me, I encourage you to join the Ridership. Simply go to www.theridership.com and join our free online community. If you're able to support the podcast, simply visit buymeacoffee.com/thegravelride. Until next time, here's to finding some dirt under your wheels.